Hi everyone, here's another question from the monthly questions thread. This one's from André. Kieren, I'm super interested in writing Novella-In-Flash stories. I think it's perfect for my discovery writer wiring. What are some tips for starting a Flash piece? I find starting the hardest. Once I get going, I'm okay. In particular, the first Flash story of a Novella-In-Flash. The first story sets the stage for everything else, so there's a lot of weight on it. Do you have a heuristic for starting? For example, lean heavily on intrigue/mystery versus perhaps over-explaining. I loved Gold Fury, it's now my benchmark. Note, I've just received Michael Loveday's Unlocking the Novella-In-Flash book this afternoon, excited to read it. I love this question. I'll take any opportunity I'm given to talk about the Novella-In-Flash. André, I know you're clearly already aware, but if anybody else is watching this and not sure what that actually is, it's essentially a collection of Flash fiction pieces presented together with some kind of common link between them. That link between them could be thematic, it could be a character, a location, a motif, anything really. It's very open to creativity. And as well as that, each story should also be able to stand alone as an independent piece of writing, and that's possibly the most unique element of a Novella-In-Flash, but I find it the most satisfying and challenging, really. And as you said, the form is perfect for discovery writing. Very much agree there. That's exactly how I approached mine, Gold Fury, as you mentioned, but I'll come on to that. The form in general just allows you to follow your creativity wherever it might take you, unencumbered by the responsibilities of a tight plot or an overarching narrative that you need to make sure you're adhering to at all times. You can choose to keep a narrative like that in place if you want to, but you just don't have to. You can connect your stories in whatever form you feel like. You mentioned starting being the hardest, and I can absolutely understand that. The great thing is that any Flash fiction or any piece of short fiction can be the start of a Novella-In-Flash. It's not quite like writing the first chapter of a novel, for example. You don't actually have to think about laying the groundwork for what you've got planned or setting the overall scene or establishing the world of your story in quite the same way. Instead, I'd suggest making the task a little easier on yourself by looking at this story as an individual, self-sufficient story before then adding to it. So if you're having trouble getting started and writing your first story, perhaps have a look through any ideas that you've had before, any stories that you really enjoyed writing that didn't necessarily go anywhere or didn't pan out, or any flashes of scenes that you never got around to writing. My approach is always scene-based because Novella-In-Flash is obviously a collection of very short pieces of Flash fiction, which can, the definition changes on what exactly Flash fiction is, but I tend to categorise it as stories up to about 1,000 words. So there's not an awful lot of time to tell a story in that length. So I focus on scenes for the most part. I think of each story as a scene in and of itself. So if you've got any ideas that you panned down for scenes that didn't necessarily pan out or lead to anything longer, they could perhaps be useful for this. The next potential starting point could be to consider not what the first story might be, but what you'll use to connect all of your stories. What do you want to be the common element running through them? That absolutely might be something that you discover as you go along, but it might also be something that you want to bear in mind before you even start. So the first story in Gold Fury came from a novel that I'd started but never finished. The central character was the carjacker that appears in that story. I remember having a hard time piecing the plot together and I felt really frustrated with it, but I was happy with that first scene. This was about the time I discovered the Bath Novella-In-Flash prize, realised a Novella-In-Flash was a thing, and the competition was closing fairly soon. So that gave me a bit of a energy boost to get something finished and sent in, and as you may know, I ended up getting shortlisted for it. Anyway, excuse the tangent. From that first story, I knew that I couldn't take the plot forward exactly, so because I tried that in the novel and it didn't work. So I took the car forward only, and I made that the motif. And I'm not really into cars. I felt no connection to that car in particular. It just seemed to be an idea that struck me that might just work. So while I don't have an exact method for starting, I think that's actually an advantage sometimes. You really can start from wherever and at any time branch off into anything else. So don't think too much that there's pressure on you to get this first story right and to set up the story and to establish that for your reader, because the first thing you write doesn't even necessarily have to be the first story. It could be halfway through, 3/4 of the way through. You could move it around as you write it. The order may not matter at all because there might not be any kind of chronology to the story. As you're a discovery writer, your strength is already in that ability to get going and find the story along the way. So lean into that to the point where even starting off by free writing might get you going if you've got nothing at all to go on. I've got a few short fiction writing exercises on the channel where I write a story along with you based on some prompts. You could, if you wanted to, ignore those prompts entirely and just spend the time free writing, or if those prompts are useful and they get you somewhere, by all means use them. That could be a starting point. All you're looking for is a spark that will get you moving. As a discovery writer, once you have that spark, then you'll know instinctively where to follow it and how to get something written. At least I do, and that's how it generally works for me as a mainly discovery writer. Once you've got that spark, just try to be as loose and open to ideas as you can be. Follow your instincts and move from story to story as freely as you can, just keeping hold of that central connecting feature. And also don't forget that each story should be able to be read independently. A Novella-In-Flash is a unique concept really, because on the one hand, story by story, you've got the precision and the accuracy that it takes to write a story and have it turn out as you want it in so few words. But then on the other side of that, it can be anything you want it to be. There's no direction that you need to take it in specifically. You don't have to stick to anything. You can completely make a collage that is only connected by the colour purple, for example, and that will work. So it's an exercise of both accuracy and freedom, and balancing that can be challenging. My overall advice would be, as it always is with writing, don't be too hard on yourself. Don't police yourself and your creativity too much. Keep everything wide open and don't worry too much about that initial story making a good impression, because it doesn't have to. You could move another story around, you could amend it once you've finished. We always have that option to redraft as writers, but getting going is more important than getting going perfectly. So just move through, find that initial spark and follow it. Thank you so much for reading Gold Fury as well. I really appreciate that. For anyone who doesn't know, it's no longer available on Amazon. I'm not selling my books through them anymore, but it's available to download with no extra charge from Patreon as long as you're a member, and as with a couple of my other books as well. And it's also the free thing that you get when you sign up to my email list. So if anyone else is interested in reading it, that's the best way to get hold of it. Hopefully this advice has been in some way useful, but I know you're in good hands with Michael Loveday's craft book anyway. He really did invent the Novella-In-Flash, really. He was the judge of the award that I was shortlisted for in 2020, and he gave me some creative coaching back then, which was really helpful. He's a great guy. Let me know how it goes. Novellas in Flash don't get a huge amount of attention, but they're so fun to write, and it's great to hear from anyone who's taking one on. And thanks again for your questions and for your compliments on Gold Fury.